There is a moment when you open a brand new app or log into a service for the first time where you just don't know how it works or if it's going to work for you. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're already deciding, is this worth my time? I have studied over 200 onboarding flows across some of the most successful and not so successful digital products out there. And what I found were common patterns, mistakes, and some really interesting insights that will change the way you think about onboarding UX and UI. So the big question is, what separates a winning onboarding flow from a failed one? And how can we design these better? Well, it turns out there's a formula and some key things that make for a really exceptional onboarding experience. So be sure to watch the whole video because some of this might not be what you expect. I have personally designed many onboarding flows, and there is one golden rule that you cannot forget, and that is you can't onboard someone you do not understand. No amount of beautiful illustrations or perfectly laid out screens or tooltips will make up for not clearly understanding your users, because the key to getting them on board is being able to meet them where they are and having a plan to get them where they're trying to go. Onboarding isn't just about showing off your product and its features. It's about getting the users to the results they care about. And for that, you need to know who they are and what they care about. So when you're planning your onboarding flow, these are the 3 steps that can make all the difference. Step number 1 is know thy user. Define your user types. The most successful products know that not every user is the same. You may have power users, casual users, skeptical users, or business use cases. You might have users that are completely non-technical and have only ever used things like Facebook or Craigslist. You might have users that are motivated by rewards and others that just aren't. This is why it's so important to do your user research and understand who your ideal customer is. And here's the kicker. It's not just about understanding who your product is for, but also about knowing who your product is not for. Trying to be everything to everyone rarely works out. So having an idea who this product is just not quite right for is a constraint that you can really use to your advantage when you are creating your onboarding flows. Notion's web app is a really great example of this. When you first sign up, it asks you whether you want to use it for a team, for personal use, or for school. So you're self-identifying with the type of use case. Then it asks you just a few questions about yourself, and it does this in a drop-down with limited options. I think in a lot of cases, this is better than just an empty form field because then you can match it better to the experience on the other end, and you have a confined amount of things that you can do when you get to the other side. So the first field is what kind of work you do. I'm going to go ahead and select product management. Then I'm going to select a team member, and then these 3 options here for wiki, project management, and company goals. Then there's a loading screen here, so it lets the user know that something is happening behind the scenes. And then you're dropped into the workspace with these walkthrough tooltips so that you have some relevant guidance and you're not left alone to fumble through this. Step 2 is to work backwards. You need to define what success looks like for your users. The best apps recognize that different users and user types have different goals and motivations and levels of experience, and that also changes each step of their journey. So here are some questions to think about. What steps absolutely need to happen to get them there? What is the simplest, most intuitive way you can guide them through those steps? And how can you get them to their first win quickly? So Acorns is a great example of this. They have quite an extensive onboarding because in a financial use case, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered in order to classify you correctly. And these are simple toggles that allow you to choose more than one so that they know how to classify you. And then the first thing is to link your bank. So this is really important. That's one of those non-negotiables where in order for you to see any results, you have to link your bank account. This is very important that they let the user know that they can trust this, that it's encrypted, etc. Then you can manually enter your bank or choose one of these options. And being able to choose this and have an auto connect feature is again giving them a quick way to a win so that they're not forced to enter everything manually. But if for some reason that doesn't work, they have the choice to link with their routing and account number instead. So next, it's letting you know how the automatic linking works using Plaid, which is this third-party thing, and that it's still safe and secure. And then you're gonna log in to your bank with those credentials and some more security checks, 2-factor authentication, probably 3. and then success. So now you're going to understand that this is a subscription-based app and there are going to be a couple of tiers here. So this is how much it costs for the personal, the family, and then once you've decided on that, you can set up your investment account. So again, there are a lot of questions here, and normally I advise against this, but again, in financial use cases, this is usually important and something that needs to be done. So it needs your employment status, yearly income, all of these things. What I'm not crazy about is that you cannot come back and finish this later. They really make you go through the entire process, and I wish that there was some notification that let me know that, hey, you're gonna need to sit down and do this in one session, because there isn't a skip or come back later option. When you do manage to get to the end of this intake, I do like this screen that summarizes everything that you've input so that you can review it and change the answers if you need to at this point. Okay, so now it lets you know that it's analyzing everything and setting up your portfolio, and that's it. Now you're in. The takeaway here is that if you don't define success for your users, they won't know when they've achieved it. Now, step 3 is the one that designers most often overlook, and that is aligning the onboarding with the business model and strategy. Onboarding isn't just about helping users understand the product. It also needs to align with how the business plans to make money and that long-term strategy. If onboarding is too aggressive in pushing monetization, users will bounce before they even understand the value. And if it's too passive, they might not ever convert. We've probably all been catfished before into getting really excited about an app only to be slammed face first into a paywall before we even get a chance to see what it can do for us. That's why it's so critical to balance user experience with business objectives, whether that's driving subscriptions, increasing ad revenue, bolstering engagement, or attracting investors. So VSCO is an app that I have some mixed feelings about. VSCO is short for Visual Supply Company, and it's a mobile app that offers photo and video editing tools. It's also got a community around it for a diverse audience that usually includes aspiring and professional photographers and content creators. Now, as I go through the sign up process, after I've created an account is when I'm hit right with a paywall. Now, because they have a freemium business model, they do allow you to see a few different features, really basic features, without starting a subscription. But you don't know that. It's really a fight to even figure out how to get into this app. So I'm clicking through. As soon as I hit start my free trial, I realize it's yearly, so I go back to see if they have a monthly. I try to continue with monthly, but there's no free trial. So back to yearly, I really don't have any idea what it looks like inside of this app. So I hit the X button thinking that I'm just going to be closed out and leave. But instead, I land inside of the app, which is pretty blank. There is a feed here. I'm going to look at my account. There aren't a whole lot of empty states and anything to guide me to figure out what's behind a paywall, what's free, what am I looking at, what should I be doing. This is a good empty state here that says create your first space, that you can build a shared gallery, but as soon as you click that, you realize it's a paywall. There's no lock icon or anything here to indicate that that is locked before I click it. So it's just a ton of clicking around, and I feel like I'm wasting a ton of time without knowing what I'm getting for free and what I'm not. So I think this could definitely benefit from some better onboarding. I can see how perhaps their goals as a business have changed since their early days of attracting funders to now a revenue-based model, but I think they could be pushing a little too hard here in the direction that turns users off from signing up. So this is another example in the same space. This is Photor, which is a photo editing app very similar to Photoshop. So right from the start, there's a lovely onboarding modal that comes up that again classifies the user. So you can choose any one of these options. And again, there are limited options. It's not just endless, and there's not just a field for you to type in your situation. So I'm going to choose content creation enthusiast. Next, it's what do you plan to use it for? And again, this is going to help customize and personalize the app for you. So I'm going to say social media content and maybe visuals for posters, etc. Next, how often do you edit and create content? I could say maybe nearly every day, and then I can click done or start free trial. So I'm just going to click done. And so right away you can see that there are tons of examples. It's very full of all kinds of things you can do. Right at the top, it asks you what you'd like to create, and there are these three main things here and things you might like to try. And that again has been personalized based on the answers to the questions in the onboarding. So if I go into photo editor here, I immediately have this pop-up again. Now this is aligned with the business model because it's really trying to push you to Photar Pro. But again, you don't need to do it right now. You can close it. Easy here to see that you can do that because of this modal. So we close that and we can continue using it. So I'm gonna open an image here. Once I've uploaded this, I see all of these options and effects and different things on the right, and these little red dots kind of indicate that I might wanna click this and try this. So let's say that I'm going to effects here and I wanna click on that. It's gonna go ahead and start rendering this cartoon graphic. There's also ads here that I've noticed. Ad revenue is part of the business model that's driving this, as well as their conversion to the pro plans. So it seems like on the free plans, they're monetizing by having ads. And if you upgrade to pro and you're paying them directly, well, then you don't have to see those ads. So this is pretty funny. It rendered me into a cartoon, and I can go to other scenes, try out all of this stuff. But as I go down, I start to see this little diamond icon on some of them. So curiously, if I were to click that and I click on this, I notice a little watermark here. And if I try to take that off, well, it triggers another modal here. So you can see how this is more cleverly built in to where I can still see this example. I can still try this effect and see if I like it. And I know already that when I see that little diamond icon that this is a pro feature that I'm gonna need to unlock. But it doesn't stop me from trying it, which I really like. And it gives me the transparency to know that it's pro. And it also uses another one of my winning formula rules, which I'll get into later in the video. So the takeaway here is that the best onboarding isn't about locking users in, but about showing them why they would never want to leave. Step 4, test, tweak, and optimize in small steps. If users drop off at a certain step, it doesn't mean that everything is wrong. Don't go redesigning all the stuff. Change one thing at a time and then measure it. Reduce the number of clicks. Change the copy. Add a visual cue. The takeaway here is that you don't fix onboarding with panic and guesswork. You fix it by testing one small change at a time. It has been my experience that the small nudges can lead to the biggest results. So after designing onboarding flows for years and looking at these 200+ examples, I noticed some of the same mistakes over and over again. Before I get into those, you might be curious at this point how I was able to study all of these. Well, I used a secret little weapon called Mobbin. I didn't have to create an account on 200+ apps, thank goodness. I just went to Mobbin and I searched up onboarding flows and I started analyzing them. And you can too. It is such an underrated tool for UX and UI designers, and I think you should really check them out because you can gain invaluable insights like these just from studying the screen flows and screencasts that they collect, and you can even bring them right into Figma to work with them yourselves. So use the link in the description below and follow along. Now that we know what works, let's talk about what doesn't. A bad onboarding experience can cause up to 80% of people to leave the app before they even try it. That's like opening a restaurant and having 100 people show up and only 10 stay to try the food and the other 90 look at the menu and walk right back out. That's not good, especially when you've poured so much into building a great product and no one even gets to see it. And we all know how important first impressions are and how hard it is to win people back. And these are easy fixable mistakes that are costing companies millions in lost users. So mistake number 1 is the too many steps trap. If you're asking for their full name, job title, favorite color, grandma's maiden name before you even let them see the product, they're not gonna like that. The best apps get users to their first win as fast as possible. And later in the video, I'll show you what to do instead. Mistake number 2, the wall of text problem. If your onboarding flow feels like a textbook, users will skip it. Instead, try using visual storytelling, quick tooltips, and real user testimonials to make it feel natural. I actually found that onboarding flows like the one here in Matter that uses animations and a storyboard style flow are really effective for getting users to get through the onboarding. Mistake number 3 is the no escape room. It's normal to feel like you want your users to understand every little bit of your product in order for them to get the full effect. But if you force them through a whole 12-step program before letting them do anything, that's usually going to backfire. So give users the option to skip things if they want to skip them, encourage them to explore on their own at the right time. And sometimes a choose your own journey is just what's right for your type of user, and sometimes more hand-holding is needed. The best onboarding flows feel like helpful guidance, not like an escape room that they have to struggle to find their way out of. So what's the winning formula? Well, there isn't just one thing, but there are 3 key elements that I've found always work really, really well for onboarding. This is the actual experience you want to aim for in terms of the interaction. So one is the "this is just for me" effect. The best apps don't treat every user the same, like we've talked about. So think about the journey and how you can personalize it to your user type or your user's actions. If your onboarding flow is one size fits all right now, it can probably be improved. This brings me to the second key element, which is the just-in-time rule. This is about progressive disclosure. And it means that users only get information when and where they actually need it. I love using action-based triggers and conditionals for this, modals or beacons or other interactions, and introduce it to them at certain points. And you could use something like intercom to do this for you. The third key element is the make it feel good factor. This is about emotional engagement. Apps that use micro rewards, progress bars, and even subtle animations can create an emotional connection with users that keep them engaged and excited and interested to come back. It's not just cute. This is pure psychology. Those tiny hits of dopamine make users feel good about using the app. And it's been proven that they work. The best onboarding flows don't just educate, but they make users feel something. Now, don't forget that I have a course. We teach this kind of practical stuff and how to be a modern day product designer. And this is everything from the UX and the UI to the business and product strategy that is missing for a lot of designers. So if you're interested in that, it's really affordable. It's a wonderful community, and I think it's a very unique experience, and I'd be honored to have you as a student too. So now, to get into some of the practical UI stuff behind onboarding, I have a table here that has 14 of the most common types of onboarding design patterns that I've identified, their attributes and screens. So if you want to go through all of this and see all of these examples, then watch this video next.